I met the subject of today's interview sometime around 2011, working in a real estate office. He didn't strike me as the typical realtor. There was no saccharine-flavored faux charisma. He wasn't overly interested in idle small talk. When he was in the office, I could tell he was always pushing something forward for his clients. As I got to know him, I noticed that he always asked incisive, smart questions about the mortgage process. He had a quick wit and a nice dry sense of humor. And these are just a couple of the things that I came to appreciate about him. I sat down with Dan Brassil to learn about his approach to the real estate process, with a particular emphasis on how he helps his buyer clients. As technology has advanced in the real estate space and as information has become more widely, freely available, many have called into question the value of the good old-fashioned real estate agent. But I trust after listening to Dan, you're going to come away with the conclusion that there will always be a place for good real estate agents that focus on education and advocacy for their clients. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining. Appreciate you coming in.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me.
The bio on your website, it references the fact that the first time you purchased a home, you said, quote, there had to be a better way to get people into great houses. That was kind of making me think that there was a story associated with this first purchase. What about that experience led you to come away with that take?
It rained on my bed the first night we moved in. The house was a rehabbed property, and I'm not against rehab property.
Sure.
But as I tell my clients, there is a profit motive behind this.
Yeah.
When there is an owner-occupant and they're selling their house, they do things to the degree that they want to finish, which is usually at a higher quality level than a rehabber. There is a spectrum of good to very bad in terms of rehabbers. I got one that was probably less on the quality scale. I will say I did not do my due diligence, which I preach to my clients on the processes that are involved in buying a house. Everything from the lending aspect to the inspection aspect to selecting a realtor to work with. All of those, I did not do my research ahead of time, and I paid the consequences.
Was it an issue that you got a home inspection and the realtor told you not to worry about it? Did you get a bad home inspection? What was that process like for you?
I did not attend a home inspection, which was a big error on my part. I've since learned, and as I tell my clients, when an inspector is there, it is a spot in time. They can find things within a 3-hour radius, but if it's a bright sunny day, they cannot check if there are issues that are going to become apparent if it was raining. But I think there were things that were missed, and I would have liked to have said I would have caught them if I, one, attended, or two, had a better knowledge of what to look for as part of that process and walk through a house.
Dan had made one career pivot already, moving away from the cubicle life at a corporate job in Chicago to teach history at a St. Louis area high school. With his own suboptimal buying experience fresh in his mind, becoming a realtor was an opportunity for growth and independence.
I learned I am not a person who does well with having a boss. I kind of like to do my own thing. And I guess I always have. And I thought of during the home buying process, I thought there could really be a better way at buying a house. So I could combine my business degree with the emphasis in marketing, with my love of history, because a lot of the homes that I was doing at the time were really walkable communities, historic homes. And marry those two together, I thought it would be a great fit. I tried to present to my clients all the things I feel I lacked during my home buying experience. So I teach them what I would have liked to have learned during that process and knew before buying a house.
What were you doing day to day to try to build your real estate business, and how did that first year go?
My first year, now this is in 2010. So people thought, 2007, 2008 were really bad, and it just got lower. In 2010, people who were looking to sell their home, everything was at a loss. For that. So it was a lot of coaching. Is this the right time? Can you hold on to it? Do you need to talk about a short sale? Is foreclosure the best route? So some of the answers I provided sellers did not get me business, but it was in their best interests. I learned at that time, I am not as a realtor, a salesperson. I'm a fiduciary. So it's guiding them to what is in their best interest, even though it may not lead to a commission or paycheck.
Okay, so you definitely took on real estate not as a sales gig, but I know that there is a sales heavy side of the real estate industry that treats it kind of like a lead generation business. And the side of the business that is based around serving clients seems like completely secondary.
I will say there is a sales aspect to real estate, but that is more selling myself for that, as opposed to selling a particular house.
In Dan's case, selling himself isn't about making a pitch, like some old school tactic you might read about in a book by Zig Ziglar or Robert Ringer. His first step is to learn what prospective clients are looking for, so he can honestly assess whether he can serve their needs.
So a lot of people contact me either by phone, text, but I think majority is actually through my website. And there's a link on there which actually says, tell me what you're looking for, where you're looking for, what's important, what are the must-haves, what are the preferences, what are the certainly not wants for that. So before I ever give them a call, I have all the information in terms of what the criteria is. And the reason I set that up first is I want to make sure I'm the right fit for them.
You're not sitting out there saying that you sell everything. I do think there are a lot of realtors, they're maybe so excited that the phone is ringing at all. They're like, I have no familiarity with this area. I've never even driven through it, but sure, get in the car. Would you say that you generally work in areas that you know pretty well? You've got your finger on the pulse there?
Definitely. Okay. And a lot of this has been over time. When I first started in real estate, I didn't know every aspect of every neighborhood like I do now. But some of that just came with kind of pushing the boundaries. But I'm completely unfamiliar with an area. I've done no business there. I will be upfront with potential clients. Essentially, I don't really have a lot of understanding of this area and the property values in there. It's more than just looking at the quantitative data to say this is what a house is worth, because it has to be based on someone who's knowledgeable in an area to guide them of what they want to be looking for. The way I view St. Louis, it's one big quilt, and there's a lot of patches. And each patch represents a township, municipality, or a neighborhood. So it's trying to take those patches which have unique personalities and to match them with what my buyers want and who they are.
For all the different people out there looking to buy, there is a common theme regarding the websites they use. Realtors, by and large, tend to have a critical opinion about sites like Zillow. But Dan has a different take.
Zillow is good as it puts out there all these homes which a buyer is not solely reliant on an agent to find a house for them. It's drastically changed where it was 20 or 30 years ago, where someone wanted to buy a house, they're reliant on, basically an MLS printout and telling an agent what they want, and they're solely reliant on that agent doing their job to help them find a house, which it takes the power out of the agent's hands and puts it more into the buyer's. So a buyer doesn't necessarily need an agent to find a house. They may feel they want an agent to guide them through the process of buying a house, but to find it, the information's out there.
Totally. It's like opening the front door to the place, getting access to the information. I think you and I would actually both agree. If that was the profession, then yeah, bring in the AI robots, replace us. My profession as well. Just replace us with computers and let's move on with it. But there is so much about both of what we do that, our expertise, our experience, in the end, that's the real value that our professions provide. So along those lines of advocacy and adding value, how do you walk through a buyer, say through the sales contract?
I walk through potential buyers, a contract before we ever see a house together. So it starts with filling out the website. From there, it's a phone conversation. If that goes well, it's a meeting at one of my offices or getting a cup of coffee somewhere. But part of that is figuring out what they want in a house, what they want in a neighborhood, and then the paperwork aspect. That's probably the least fun of the options that we go through, but I explain to them this is the most important aspect we're going to talk about. I want you to make sure you feel you understand this to agree where you're willing to put down a lot of money on a potential purchase. Buying a house is stressful at times, but the more a client actually understands their contingencies, their rights, their responsibilities, the less stress it's going to be on them. So they're making an informed decision based on everything they know about the contract. So that is part of that education. So it's going through all of that before we ever see a house together.
We're in this crazy seller's market right now. How do you walk through the kind of risk, potential, reward of, say, waiving things like inspection contingencies, financing contingencies, etc.?
I may guide them differently to make their best offer. If one person is a baby boomer and they're an all-cash offer, they may be willing to take on more risk on a potential purchase versus someone is an FHA buyer with 5% down or 3.5% down. It's their very first home buy. That's going to be a very different set of circumstances because they're probably going to take less risk. So it's matching that risk to what each client desires in the end.
There's kind of some improv associated with the job that you do. So beyond the contract, getting under contract, explaining the contract, etc., you've got buyers, they're out there looking at homes. Before the home inspection itself, what are some things that you have taught the buyers about the home?
During the initial showing, when we walk through a house, it really starts with just on the street. I have my clients look around. Is this somewhere you feel you'd want to live? I have clients who could love a house, but they may not like the area that it's in. They may not like the block. It's just more of a feeling. Now I can look on Google Maps and Google Earth, and I could give it, and I encourage my clients to do the same, but you can't get a feel until you're actually on the property and all the property lines to feel, is this somewhere you want to live? So it starts with that. Going through the house, I give my clients clear instructions. Your job, essentially, to find out if you like the house. My job, on the other end, is to find out what's wrong with it.
I understand that you have some kind of unique tools that you use when evaluating a home.
It started out with probably just a few things that a lot of people have in terms of, a scale. Like if the floors are sloping, how much are they sloping? Sometimes that is just a leveler. Another times it may be just a marble, but it's in how fast is it moving across across a floor? One thing I've found is invaluable is just having a foldable ladder in my car. But I've been on a number of roof systems. If something is a 2 or 3 story and my little 12-foot ladder is not going to get on the roof, I have a drone. So I throw that on the roof many times and take video and show my client this is what we're looking at, because that could be an expensive fix. In addition to that, moisture meters, I'm a big fan of, depending on where it is. Anywhere around, chimney systems, old plaster in basements. But a moisture meter is available to tell me if there's issues, especially with rehab properties that are kind of brand new and you can't see any calcium buildup on a floor, to figure out if there's current or past moisture settling in a house. A 360 laser I put in a basement, I find that invaluable after a lot of walk and talks with structural engineers in terms of what to look for in settling of a house. The only thing I don't have, and I'm not looking really to add, is basically a sewer lateral camera, and that gets a little messy. But those can be expensive repairs. My sewer lateral went bad 2 years after my purchase, and it was $5,500 in order to replace.
If there is one group of buyers that need Dan's level of attention to detail, it is someone in a growing segment of folks who are looking to purchase a home remotely, in some cases without ever setting eyes on the home before closing. If I was moving to St. Louis, I wasn't going to see the property, what are some things that you would do to help make that process work?
First off, it is not something to advocate for, but circumstances are different per person. And there are times when I've helped clients buy a property that they have not seen physically in person. It comes back to some of the tools I use. Having a stabilizer is invaluable. For me to walk around, which I used to years ago, with just an iPhone taking a video and pictures and guiding clients through, without a stabilizer, it's just very choppy, and a client can really get a good feel for a house. Now, nothing beats being in person for walking through a house, but if you need a close second, good video is definitely helpful. Now, I'm placing my biases of what I like or don't like, but I'm trying to put those on clients. But problems, that's objective, essentially, if I see something. So it's guiding them through telling clients, what is the feel I get within a house? Does it feel like good natural light, which may not come through in a video? How does this space feel? Is it tall? Is it short? Is it wide? Is it narrow? But also looking for those problems. But it's also walking the block. Again, it's to help clients get a good feel for the house if they can't be there in person.
Obviously, I'm recommending anybody that's watching this that's actually looking to move to St. Louis, obviously call Dan, but I'm really interested in your perspective. How would you advise somebody in some market that you don't serve? How would you advise them to, number one, find a realtor, or maybe a set of realtors? And then 2, how should they winnow that list down to the person that they should choose to work with?
To recommend someone else and how to look for an agent, I think it goes beyond just talking to one person and saying, well, you should use my realtor. Just because that person had a positive experience, it may be because nothing went wrong with the transaction. There is not necessarily value added when everything is smooth. You want a realtor who's going to know what to do when things go wrong and to help you mitigate those risks ahead of time so that you as a buyer are knowledgeable what things can pop up so you're prepared for that. I get a lot of potential clients just from reviews. People have looked me up and read reviews on multiple sites for that. So when you're able to do that, one, make sure the realtor is knowledgeable about the area you're looking at. And for Zillow, as good and bad that is on a number of different levels, you could pick up essentially in a certain area who are the agents who are doing the most amount of business. You could then look at all those reviews from past clients who bought or sold within a particular area. How much business are they doing, as well as what have people said about that person?
All right, Dan, this is maybe a little bit of a selfish question because it has to do with loans. Would you be able to share from me any horror stories involving other loan officers other than myself?
Yes.
What do you got?
I do not tell my clients who they should use. That is completely up to them because it is their investment for that. But I do ask if that is a brick and mortar shop locally or if that is an online lender. I will tell some of my horror stories about online lenders to my clients. It is not to unduly influence them, but I think it is valuable information to know what's the experience I've had in the past.
I won't name any names here, but big box online lender that does a lot of advertising, 70% of the time, a stat that I just made up, they probably do a fair job of getting people through the process, but it is that 30% of the time, again, a stat that I have completely made up. But how exactly do things go wrong with lenders?
There are a couple different situations where I've had buyers use the exact same lender each time, and after loan commitment was passed, they actually came back and said, we need more time, even though they already guaranteed the loan. So it is a false loan commitment. The problem with that is that the lender is not on the hook because the lender's not on the contract. It's the buyer's on the contract. So that is some of the things where I had a situation where that popped up and they came back and said, we need to extend closing by 2 weeks.
Hey, seller in a seller's market, let's move this closing 2 weeks. You don't have a problem with that, right? So how did that end up?
It was a vacant property. So number one, the way the seller would look at it is that they're going to have to cover a half a month's mortgage for that, which is not something they would like. At that point, my client was in breach of contract, which has legal ramifications. We were able to work things out with the seller, but my client, the buyer, had to cover half the month's mortgage for a property he was not going to own. That appeased the seller and their agent, but that was a mistake of the lender that my buyer literally had to pay for because a mistake that lender did not understand the legal ramifications, how important a loan commitment is during the process. One thing I'm big on with lenders, and I tell my clients, that if you talk to more than one, and that's fine to do, but it's to interview them. Just as I'm big on education for my clients, I want the lenders to be big education. I want my lenders essentially to teach the process and everything that's going on behind the scenes. So my clients are in the know and they understand the process. I've talked to lenders for 30 minutes. And after 30 minutes, 2 and 2 equals 5. And it makes sense because it's so convoluted in terms of the information I'm getting. You, Mark, I think do really well as you're able to break down complicated terms and items and rates and break that down to an easily understandable conversation with buyers so they understand what's going on, what your role is, what you're doing, and your expectation of those buyers to reach to a successful conclusion of buying a house.
I really appreciate that. And I think where that comes from is, I have this impression that it is actually very difficult to find information about both real estate and how the process actually works. You get these big picture articles and there's a lot of like kind of clickbaity things, top 10 things not to do in September when buying a house. It's like, okay. But it's really difficult to get into like the meat of any of these issues because any good information that might be out there is basically, boom, it's not a paywall, it's a lead wall. So you might find an article that addresses something, click to see more, and all of a sudden you put in your name and number, and then your phone starts blowing up. And then these people that you get, they're salespeople, they're not educators. So I guess long story short for me, I see it as like a responsibility, like just put myself in their shoes. If I was getting a mortgage, what kind of advice and education would I want? And candidly, my industry more even I think than yours. Talk about the alphabet soup of inside baseball terminology. I mean, you could have a conversation with somebody in the mortgage business and be speaking 2 separate languages, both called English. So yeah, I really appreciate that. All right. One last question for you, and this will get a little personal. I have noticed that you and your wife post these adorable photos of long nature hike adventures, and these pictures all feature what I believe are peanut butter jelly sandwiches. When did this tradition start, and what's it all about?
My wife and I, we love the outdoors for where that is. So we're big fans of just national parks. So when we get time, and one of the great things about being a real estate agent is when I have downtime, and it's never planned, essentially. I mean, when things get a little slower throughout the year, you take advantage of it. And we try to, in terms of just, hop on a flight in Southwest and then go into a national park and spending time in a cabin or, nearby motel or hotel for where that is. And I think it just started once with taking a PBJ sandwich. I mean, what's better than, walk with a PBJ sandwich takes it back when I was a kid.
It travels well, it doesn't get too soggy. All right, Dan. Well, I really appreciate you coming in all the way down to my house here for this interview. How should people reach out to you if they want to get in touch?
They can reach me on my website, danbrassil.com, or just give me a call, 314-452-8211.
Okay. And folks, it is Brassil, by the way. I get calls from a lot of people that are working with Dan, and I can always tell that they're working with this particular Dan because they'll say, I'm working with Dan, and there's a pause. So I'll say, Brassil. So thanks again for coming in. I really appreciate it.